This is Lori Hanau of Global Roundtable Leadership, and I am so delighted to again be with a main part of my beautiful team, our team, Sebastian and Melissa and Kate and Tristan and Travis. And Dhruva is not here with us today, unfortunately, but hopefully will be in the near future. So last week we did a spontaneous, unscripted video about being made for these times, how much we feel we are made for these times, that we meaning all of us and all of us together. And we just put out a newsletter to the same point. And we thought it may be nice. We actually all felt so inspired by being able to share as a team ourselves that we want to do it again. And so here we are. And continues to be unscripted. And but one thing we know, what we did talk about for a few minutes before we hit record, is that we want this to be nourishing and to stimulate your own wisdom and individual and collective genius and hearts and spirits. And so definitely, get a cup of tea or a cup of coffee or something nourishing to drink, and maybe a little snack or something nourishing to eat, and sit down and get cozy and join us, because it's in this spirit that we offer these few minutes to you. And so Tristan, I'm passing our shared leadership team baton over to you to take us forward.
Well, thank you. My wife is a minister, ordained minister and pastor and hospice chaplain, and she shared with me an article, and I think we'll be able to embed the link to the article in the video. And it's by a woman named Emily Scott, Pastor Emily Scott, and it's called "Your Brain Won't Work as Well: Tips for Spiritual Leaders During COVID-19." And she writes out of the experience that she had working in New York City after Hurricane Sandy. And one of the things, well, it's embedded in the title, but it's also the very first thing she says is that your brain won't work as well. And her words, "This week I've forgotten what I was doing 1,000 times. Stress messes with your sequencing, and ordering your thoughts gets hard." And a little later in the article, she talks about how we're able to do 50 to 75%, and I don't think that's a research-driven statement, but I think an experience-driven statement, that there's a diminishment in the capacity of what we can hold. And so I thought about kind of what it means right now for all of us who are experiencing the pandemic, and then also at the same time this substantial disruption of trying to move into the digital space, so the virtual space, to build our connections with each other, both through our work and also our social connections in many ways through virtual technology, and the challenge of that. And then I think we were collectively earlier reflecting on what it meant to us to say that we are made for these times. And so here I've sort of laid out the argument through Pastor Scott that in some ways that we're challenged and diminished in our capacity in some ways. And so what does it mean to say we're made for these times, and how does that start to make sense and get reconciled? And so what I would offer is actually we have a definition of shared leadership that we have used within Global Roundtable, and I think that Travis is going to be able to put that up onto the screen now. And I think that this is a key way in which we can sort of make sense of what it means to say we are made for these times, and also to acknowledge these major systems changes that we're working through. And Travis, if you could just throw that up on the screen. And then I think I'll read it aloud, and then I'll name the connection that I see here. So shared leadership is the practice of bringing out the greatest capacity in everyone by empowering us all to be responsible for and engaged in the vibrancy and high function of the whole. This is a fundamental shift in how we understand and apply power and leadership. And so we'll leave that up there for just a minute, and then we can move it down after. And so what I would sort of throw out there as a starting point for our conversation is that that the stress and the way that this is impacting our brains and our functioning and our sort of expectations about what normal is and what it means to be stretching ourselves into the work of trying to be more virtual and how we interact with each other in that way. All of these things speak to what we have here at GRTL believed about our innate capacities and the call of our times, and that we are made for this, that we are made for these times, and that we just simply maybe have forgotten or aren't able to access the core capacities within ourselves, and our sort of shared responsibility in the fullness of what is possible, and that these times may actually create in us the shifts that force us out into doing that, and that acknowledging the limits of it, what any one of us can do is a part of how we then show up authentically for each other and can begin to share the responsibility for the vibrancy and high function of the whole. And so I'll step back and let others fill the space. Thank you.
I'll step in. I think what really stands out right now in the definition and in the setup from the article that you read is about how vibrancy and being attuned to our vibrancy, and that even as we're working in new ways and trying new things and taking a lot more things on, you know, some of us are becoming homeschoolers more or less and working from home and learning new technology and grappling with news every day, is that the vibrancy that we're feeling is shifting, and that part of being on this team and on other teams where we're focused on each other is acknowledging that and taking time to check in and say, you know, how is your energy? How are you doing in all this? And how can we help? And how can we help accommodate wherever you are right now? And I think that's a really important part of what the shifts that I'm seeing as we're shifting to working at home and checking in with each other using technology is just that support, that mutual support, and that people, it's okay to ask, how are you doing, and how can I help, and what are you doing to take care of yourself in these really interesting times. So I think that's what's speaking to me at this point, and the reality of it. There's a lot going on, right? So cut yourself some slack and cut the other people some slack, right? And we're all in it together.
One of the things that sparks in me to contribute is a conversation that Melissa and I were having like a month ago, where we both experienced ourselves as forgetting so much more than either one of us, I think, self-identify as, you know, regularly forgetting. And because of our work with individuals and teams on working on them on how to share leadership and power, working with them, you know, I'm talking a lot to a lot of different people across the sectors, across the ages, you know, generational, chronological age. And I've been noticing this everywhere, just how forgetful, how much more forgetful people seem to be. And I'll say, you know, I do have this belief that we may have been influenced by what was coming, you know, where are these animals and these creatures, these living systems, and, you know, the channels that we are, the vibrators that we are here, you know, may have been started to be affected by this even before we realized it. Um, but it was a great conversation for Melissa and I, and we just talked about the kindness and the compassion that we needed to have for ourselves and for each other. And we brought that to one of our team meetings a couple of Mondays ago. And we were looking at the way we already are working. We've been working virtually for a few years now, a number of years now, actually. And so in this way, we've been prepared. And this is a part of why we also want to talk to all of you is that we've maybe been flexing these muscles for a bit. And we've learned a few things. And one of them is that being virtual is exhausting. Being on Zoom is exhausting. 2 or 3 hours, you know, can gong you out, especially if you're not used to it at first. But still, even after all these years, we do find that it's exhausting. And so I'll just say a couple more things and then I'll step back to give others time to speak, but we create our agendas in a very shared way that everybody takes a piece, because that allows us to kind of sit back and rest. We're still participating, but there's another way we participate when we have the strong lead. And so we're all still committed to not getting distracted, but that does help. We share in the agenda design. We take turns leading different parts. We're not always leading the same part. And if somebody forgets, we hold ourselves both individually and collectively responsible for the different pieces. And so it's not just on any one person to remember, but on all of us together. And we make sure that we take good breaks. And one thing I've been thinking about more that I wanted to say to all of you, and I was going to tell you today, and I forgot, is I wanted stretching actually even during our time of our 3-hour Monday meetings that we have. And so I hope to start that next week. But I had this idea of us also stretching, not just taking breaks away from each other. So I'll step back, but that's what came to me with what Tristan has led us in.
Oh my gosh, can I just say the term Zoom fatigue is real. And in a lot of the circles that I've been talking with, people are astounded at how exhausted they are. Folks are responding by really, like, they're tired. And so and it's been beautiful because I've been watching people, not that you need permission, but they're getting permission from their friends and their families to take naps and to sleep well. So if that's something that comes out of this, well, yay, because again, Zoom fatigue, as you mentioned, Lori, it's a real thing, right? You got to figure out how to balance it out.
And I'm going to pop back in for 1 second with you, Kate, to say that we start with wellness. We have a wellness check-in, and we check on our well-being as another way to be together with our time on Zoom.
Now, I was going to offer one piece here, and I'm mindful that we have 3 other voices that we have so far elbowed out of the conversation. And I promise to step back again shortly after. The active management, Laura's given a bunch of examples of different ways that we sort of become more invested in co-creating the design and how co-facilitating or co-holding that together, and how that helps maintain your focus and presence. And what I would say is that because we have been as a team practicing virtually for a while, there is a fluidity to the way that we can move in and out of supporting each other differently. I'm also in the Vermont legislature, and we are in the process of trying to get 150 House members across 14 different legislative committees to function virtually in Zoom. And I'm one of 2 or 3 people who has any real experience with it. And what I'm seeing there is that that it's, very different experience for me to participate in one of those meetings where I'm trying to help prop people up on the basics of the technology, not getting the sort of the fluidity and high functioning of this team. And so to me, that's another point about what it means to support sort of the vibrancy and high function, is that we've actually invested all of us in that skill building work over time and practiced and processed aloud after the fact, like, what are we not doing well? How do we have to change our rhythms and our patterns? So we have a sort of a depth of experience, and that I feel it's so important for people who are relatively new to living in the virtual space, particularly with teams that are maybe new to doing it. There may be individuals, but just with teams, that the Zoom fatigue is partly tied to the fact that it can fall really disproportionately on one or two people who might be trying to kind of keep it all together on the technology side, or who think that they have to hold everything as leaders, like they have to hold the agenda, they have to hold the team accountable, they have to hold the technology. That it has to be shared, it has to be done.
I think there's a lot here, and I appreciate everything that you all have named. I also, it's a fun example too of introvert and extrovert. I think as we think about our different teams and ourselves, introversion and extroversion is important. Also, if you hear in the background, my 5-month-old son might be saying some things, trying to say some things. And my dog next to me is probably dreaming and making loud noises too. So I think when we think about our virtual teams and also working out of home, there's a mixture of home and work that starts to happen when you work virtually that you might not be used to in the workplace. There's also, extrovert friendly meetings become different when you're on Zoom, and the idea of jumping right in when someone else finishes talking is really tempting. And especially for an introvert like me, it can be hard to have the space to have a couple seconds of silence to think. There's a lot of pressure to, jump right in at the next person and be super efficient and try to move meetings along really quickly. But one of the things I love about the definition of shared leadership is that we're bringing out the greatest capacity in everyone by empowering all of us. And those are big ideas, to try to empower everyone to have their greatest capacity to support the team and to show up as who they really are most deeply is huge. And a lot of us either haven't been around that type of environment, we haven't really felt like we've been empowered at that level, or we're not used to empowering other people at that level. When I was in the Peace Corps for years, capacity building is a huge part of what the Peace Corps' mission is, which is to go into countries that we're invited into to try to support and listen and understand, and then to train and teach and help, but really through other people letting us know what they want and what they need. So instead of Peace Corps volunteers coming in and saying, here's what you need to learn and here's how it's going to be, it's what would you like to learn? What might I be able to help you with? What's already going really well that we can highlight and share across the country or across the province? And it's a very much a humility creating job. And I think when we talk about building capacity and empowering others, it's this idea of how can I show up to help you be your greatest self? And as a team, how can we each show up in that way for one another? And I think that to me is always humbling every day, every week. And it also puts a responsibility on each of us to show up as our full selves too, and think about how can we be even more empowered ourselves and more responsible. And I feel like it's a huge growing opportunity that I feel very grateful to be able to do with our team.
If I may jump in after that, I wanted to include the very, very lighter side of nourishment. I think that the wellness check-ins are absolutely phenomenal with our team. Very important to realize that today this is our new normal, that we are interacting virtually, and to really bring our whole hearts into our meetings, but also a sense of humor. I think that the way that we interact, the way that we're able to sometimes shift into playfulness really opens it up, because at the end, these are times of sacrifice. We are sacrificing the human contact and the presence that we very much love. But at the same time, I wanted to emphasize this idea that we are actually getting through this together. Like, not in the near future, we'll get through this together. We're actually today getting through this together. We're moving through this crisis. We are getting through this together, moving. So I was talking to Travis, there's so many things shifting. We're all feeling very nervous, very anxious, yes, but at the same time, we are already holding hands, even if it's virtually, and we are cruising together. So that's my message. Thank you.
And Sebastian, may I just add, with the typically unseen and unheard, that I do experience that there's something going on in so many pockets that together, the who the together is also shifting in our consciousness at a collective level. And more of us are seeing those who typically are not seeing, and thinking about how we tend together to each other. I want to name that. Thank you.
I just want to bounce off what Sebastian said, and the wellness check-ins are huge for me, and I look forward to them every week because I get to see everybody virtually. But it's also relating to your team members in a humanistic way, being able to hear where they've been, what they've been feeling, what they've been doing for this past week. And I also think taking care of yourself during this time and always helps you take care of your team and the whole as well. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Em. Thank you, glorious team. And yeah, just thank you, world. Thank you, world. May this just be a moment and a time that we continue to learn through and be willing to break from our normal to be disrupted, and access deeper wisdom. So thank you for being there. Thank you for your own care and wisdom, and stay safe. And maybe we'll see you again.
Yay.
Bye for now.
Bye for now.